Hi golfers, Nick here for Nick Taylor Golf. It's Friday, so welcome to another lesson on golf tips. This week on Golf Tips, I'm going to talk you through a progression of a beginner golfer who started here at GOLFTEC using the stack and tilt system. So when this golfer started, she was a complete beginner, and we're going to talk you through the areas we took to improve her golf, help her hit the ball further, control a low point better, and hopefully help you guys out there play better golf. First up, golfers, I'm going to talk you through this golfer's first lesson. And this is something I see with a lot of beginner golfers and a lot of high handicappers, something they do in their swing that really affects their ability to improve. So in this particular lesson here, I see this day in, day out. And it makes sense to start with. As you start to play golf, the first thing you want to do is get the golf ball up into the air. So golfers do this by kind of moving their body weight to their right and then trying to kind of lift the ball up into the air. However, the problem by doing this, it does work sometimes, but it's never consistent. You're never going to kind of maximize your potential distance. So taking a look at that shot there, I hit 4 degrees up, and you can see the contact there very low on the club face, and you see this a lot. On a mat here, you can probably get away with it, and a lot of golfers do struggle on the golf course, but not so much on the range, and a lot of it's down to the way they deliver the club. Like as I'm hitting up there, I actually hit an okay shot, but maybe on the grass I would have hit 4 or 5 inches behind the ball and wouldn't have had the same result. I think that's quite important to note. So you can see in this particular golfer's swing, sway, arms, hands out very wide here. There's a huge gap, her hands are very high. So from here it's very difficult to deliver any shaft lean or get the weight forward here. If you did, there'd be no power. So the first step really was to start to work on this golfer's backswing, because in the backswing didn't really set a wrist and the sway off the golf ball, and this particular golfer did have a kind of good movement into the finish, so she certainly had some pieces in the golf swing that she did very well. However, we had to kind of really break it down. So the first thing we did was start to work on the backswing, and you can see the change here in kind of the sway. So the thoughts were to try and keep centered. We did lots of practice swings, kind of held her head in position. I think that's quite important, trying to get the feel for that. That's something I'd work on with a lot of golfers to make sure they keep their weight more on their left, because the tendency is always going to be to kind of move to the right to try and help the golf ball up. So once we started to do that, her backswing, this was over a few lessons, we started to really improve the top of her backswing. Now from here, she still had that tendency kind of cast out the club. However, now she's really trying to move her weight forward, because you know she has to try and hit down on the golf ball. We'd worked a lot on trying to control where the club hits the ground, so there's a number of factors that do control that. By moving your weight more to the left, you can potentially hit further forward on the ground, but it wasn't quite coordinated, and you can see how wide the kind of swing was here, and still the tendency was to, even by moving forward, she was still having that tendency of not really making good contact and generally hitting up on the golf ball, not controlling that low point, not really creating any power. So where we move from there, because once we got that backswing right, finish position was quite good, we had to really work on a wrist. And actually we started this particular lesson here with a wedge. So I switched the club here, just grabbed the wedge. And in this particular lesson, we did a lot on a kind of wrist movements here. So you can see the difference in the way she kind of loads her wrist in this particular swing here. And throughout the course of this particular lesson, we actually probably hit about 10 shots in about an hour, and I think that's quite important to note, guys. When you're practicing, you don't have to keep hitting lots of shots. We did lots of kind of practice swings, because if you can do a practice swing well, it gives you that chance then when the golf ball's there. You're not always going to have that tendency in the back of the mind to try and lift the golf ball up into the air if you're doing a practice swing. Once you can see that on the video and you can see the difference between where she was and then in the practice swing, it really does give that golfer confidence. Also, using a wedge, it's a shorter club, easier to control, and there's more loft, so you don't have that tendency there at the last second to try and scoop the ball up. So the shots that we actually did in this lesson were, well, we didn't do many, but we did a lot of practice swings. We actually, when we did hit, it was more of a stop quick exercise, really kind of bending the wrist, stopping, really just trying to get her to feel that compression on the golf ball. And actually, in that particular lesson, she hit a couple of shots that were just made such a big difference, kind of like a light bulb moment in the golf swing where you hit a shot and it just feels completely different. So doing lots of practice swings, using a more lofted club was a real good way for this golfer to really feel something different in a golf swing. So the tendency was to cast it out. She kind of tried to move the weight forward by doing this. So in this particular lesson, we tried to increase her bend and turning. So to do this, we kind of went a bit wider, and then we narrowed the swing coming down. You can see where my hands are at this point. So we kind of went wide and narrow, really trying to load the wrist differently, because if you start casting it out, you're potentially losing that power, and it's very hard to create any speed in the swing. So once we started to use the wrist better, did lots of practice swings, hit those little shots, then we could move on to a different golf club. Now, at the start of this next lesson here, this was with a 7-iron. We actually started again with the wedge. This is a good way for you guys to kind of start your practice sessions, rather than just grabbing a 7-iron or driver to start with. Why not grab a wedge or a 9-iron, something with a bit more loft, and work on some drills. If this is something you struggle with, compressing the ball, getting that low point forward, just start off with some wedges, punch some shots forward, then gradually work your way up to, say, a 7-iron. And in this particular lesson here, you can see the shot here with the 7-iron. This is when things started to really fall into place. We controlled the sway in the backswing, controlled the wrist better coming down, controlled the sway a bit better coming down, and still had a pretty good finish. We kind of put all those pieces together, and once we started to do that, it made such a big difference for this golfer, and it was a massive sort of transformation. So controlling the sway and the wrist, increasing the wrist bend coming down, moving the hips forward and turning, made such a big difference. And once that golfer put those pieces together, she started to hit the ball further, straighter, more consistently. So big transformation there for that particular golfer. And I just wanted to kind of stress you guys the point there that when you do work on your swing, right, you have to work in a systematic way. Certainly here at GOLFTEC and stack and tilt coaches around the world, we kind of have a system of where to start, and I think that's quite important, right? You have to step by step. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see of golfers that they try and do too much in one go, right? You can see in the first lesson there's a lot to do there, but you kind of have to start somewhere, and sometimes I start on the work on the finish position first. But in this particular lesson, I wanted to really build a backswing. So I think that once I did that, then she could start to move better into the downswing. So in a systematic way over a period of time, we really made a difference to this golfer. So it's important, guys, you need to be patient, work with an instructor that's really going to help you in a systematic way. And when you practice your swing, start to maybe work with some different clubs, do some practice swings. Don't always have to keep hitting the same club all the time. So hopefully that video helps golfers, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't already, please follow me on my other social media platforms, and I'll see you again next week for another video.